Hey, welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole with John and Ed. Hi, Ed.
Hey, John. How you doing?
Doing all right, mate. I'm doing up, mate. So we are going to talk about the Anunnaki, and we're going to do a deep dive. We've got plenty of information about them now, haven't we?
Yes, we do. And it's also been one of my favorite rabbit holes for about 20 years. So, yeah, I've been looking forward to this one because we haven't actually done a show specifically about the Anunnaki and the legends surrounding them and Sitchin and all that kind of thing.
We have spoken of them quite a few times, but this is their own show. Here we go. Right,
So where do you want to start?
Keep sinking. Yeah, well, let's start. Let's start at the beginning. The origins and etymology of the Anunnaki, alternatively transcribed as Anunnaki, Anunnaka, Annuna, Arianki. Other variations were a significant group of deities. Deities, I say, in the pantheons of several ancient Mesopotamian civilizations, including the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Assyrians, and the Babylonians. They got around, these guys. They got around. The name itself provides insight into their cosmic significance, derived from An, the Sumerian god of the sky, with a full term meaning princely, offspring, or offspring of An. This lineage places them amongst the most important divine beings in Mesopotamian cosmology, as they were believed to be descendants of the union between An, the god of the heavens, and Ki, the goddess of earth. This divine parentage established their authority over both celestial and terrestrial domains, forming a crucial link between the heavens and the human world. So, ancient gods. That's the first part. And treated as gods. That's the official brief, yeah. So they've been around though. I mean, I think first actual writings are around about 2000 or something BC, yeah.
Mm-hmm. The third dynasty of Ur. And yeah, during that early period, they were primarily understood as powerful deities within the Sumerian pantheon, descendants of the sky god An, and amongst the most influential divine forces. In these earliest conceptualizations, the Anunnaki likely included what Sumerians considered the seven gods who decree: An, Enlil, Enki, Ninhursag, Nana, Utu, and Inanna. These deities represented fundamental cosmic forces such as the sky, earth, water, fertility, the moon, sun, love, war, respectively, controlling virtually every aspect of human existence according to Sumerian belief. So, thus far, pretty standard gods.
But when gods. Speaking of a shitload of things, we've got a shitload of people in the troll room. Good.
Woohoo.
Welcome to the troll room. Beats and Tapes. Guys. Paul Armstrong. Robin. Good to see you, Robin. We also got Ray. Yep, Ray. Are we playing the Anunnaki drinking game? What you doing? The privacy of your own home, mate, is up to you.
Well, the Anunnaki drinking game, if you want to play it, is every time John or I mentions one of the names of the gods, Enlil, Enki, An, Ninhursag, etc., you have to take a drink.
Okay.
We're obviously not going to, because otherwise we'll be shit-faced by the end of the show.
Yeah, so would everybody else. Nectaritas, good evening to you, sir. Shalini. Dave Barnes. Hello, Dave. Good to see you. I think
Dave is a good friend of mine.
I think, did Dave come over from Twitter? Is that the same Dave Barnes that's on X? Yeah. Excellent. Good to see you. Who else we got? Oh, good God. That's about it just now. Right. You can't come on here without a drink, Beats and Tapes.
No.
Come on.
No.
You know,
well, you can if you're a non-drinking type person and you're a sensible one who eschews alcohol. Yes, come and join us as long as you don't mind.
To be fair,
two drunken idiots babbling for a couple of hours.
You can do anything you like because we are not going to stop you because this is the home of free speech. Sorry, that's tomorrow night. I'm going off on one now. Right. Okay, Ed.
And unfortunately, I can't join you tomorrow.
No.
I will be in an undisclosed location visiting family.
Right. Okay.
But back to the Anunnaki. The thing, although a lot of these Anunnaki gods and the things that they represent seem pretty familiar, because I mean the Egyptians had gods like that, the Greeks had gods like that. What's interesting about the Anunnaki is it starts with the Sumerians, because the Sumerians are where civilization just magically popped up overnight about 6,000 years ago, roughly.
Yeah.
And until then, we were hunter-gatherers. So in addition to all of the legal systems and mathematics and all sorts of things that start in Sumeria, organized religion is kind of one of them as well.
Oh, yeah. So the role and conceptualization of the Anunnaki evolved significantly throughout the history of Mesopotamian religion.
Mesopotamian
religion. In early Sumerian texts, they appear as heavenly deities with immense powers who played a critical role in maintaining cosmic order. A bit like the Eternals. Oh my God, that was a terrible movie. Right. Anyway, the poem Enki and the world. It does sound a bit Norse Godish, doesn't it? It sounds very Norse Godish when you listen to the names like Enki. You know, Enel.
It does.
Narsag, Nana, Utu, and Anna. You know, it does sound a bit Norwegianish.
Well, yeah, it's a sort of a bit Norwegian mixed with ancient Egyptian.
Yeah, they've kind of. I'm pretty sure the Norse gods are these guys. They've just migrated north. You know, like most people from the south seem to do. They migrate north.
Well, yeah, it's pretty bloody stupid if you ask me, but hey.
Yeah, tell me about it. You come from a perfectly dry, warm country and come to Scotland where I'm freaking freezing my nuts off. My diesel heater's not working.
Oh, God.
And my diesel heater's packed in. I'm going to have to strip it down and see if I can fix it.
That's a bit of a nightmare.
Right. Yeah. So, the poem Enki and the World Order describes Anunnaki doing homage to Enki, the god of water and human culture, singing hymns in his honour, taking up residence amongst the people of Sumer. Perhaps more significantly, this composition explicitly states that the Anunnaki decree the fates of mankind, establishing their direct influence over human destiny. So now we've gone from the Anunnaki just being gods to actual wielding the direction in which the human race is taking. And that might come back to bite us in the ass, so to speak. Yeah?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is something that has always stood out to me about the Anunnaki, is that the way that they're described in the Sumerian cuneiform and some of the images on the cylinder seals and stuff, they seemed, it's not like the god of Christianity, who nobody's ever seen him, and we don't even know if it's a him or a her or an it or a they or a them or whatever. And yet people build churches for him or him or her and worship him and everything else. And the stories like that as well. I mean, you have Jesus, who is God's messenger on earth, but God himself is never seen. Whereas these ancient Anunnaki, supposedly, I mean, they're described in a more real way, as if they were actually walking around with the Sumerians somehow and actually directing things and telling them what to do, because the Sumerians ascribe their knowledge of all sorts of things. I mean, the civilizational sort of knowledge, legal systems, that kind of thing. Essentially, all of that comes from the Anunnaki. They didn't just invent all of that stuff themselves.
So, oh, maybe they were. Maybe have we considered that ancient civilizations maybe had ancient civilizations before them?
To be honest, from my perspective, I think that's a given at the moment. I think anyone who thinks that human civilization springs up magically with the Sumerians is ignoring large amounts of archaeology, Göbekli Tepe, Gunung Padang, all sorts of places that are and have been established as being much older than the Sumerians, indicating that there must have been some sort of advanced civilization. And when you couple that with Ben Davidson's 12,000 year catastrophe cycle,
Yeah.
which also ties into the yugas, the Hindu yugas,
Yeah.
Kali Yuga, etc. And if you think that maybe civilizations are being created and destroyed every 12,000 years, and you have a civilization that builds up and then the cataclysm happens and everything's reset back to the pre-Stone Age, and then the whole thing happens again, and who knows how long that's been going on for. I mean, I saw a fantastic story about, because with the Anunnaki story, theoretically, according to Sitchin's interpretation, we'll probably come to him in a little while, the Anunnaki came to Earth about 450,000 years ago to mine gold. Now, that sounds crazy until you see a story that I saw the other week of a machine screw being found by archaeologists or geologists or somewhere in rock that was dated to about 300,000 years ago. And this is not a natural thing. You can.
There's the hammer, isn't there?
Mhm.
Remember the hammer that was found in rock?
Yeah.
And that rock was dated to something like, I don't know, something like 1,000,000 years old or something.
Yeah.
But
And
it's really hard to date rock, Ed, because you can't carbon date rock.
That's true. Yes, that is true.
So you're going a lot with what's around it and, you know, the layers and things. So maybe it's not as old as that. It's hard to tell, you know.
But even if it's not 300,000 years, the machine screws are a fairly recent human invention. I'm talking,
yeah, they are
2, 3, 400 years longer, maybe 500 years. I don't know. Did the Romans use screws as well as nails? Maybe they did.
I'm not sure.
But that's still, I mean, it's. I don't see how you could have something like that in sediment layers, and it's not just the only example of things that archaeologists have found that just don't make any sense. Anyway, let's go back to our intro.
Okay. Yeah.
So the number and specific identity of the Anunnaki remains somewhat fluid in ancient texts. No complete list has survived. The Sumerian text described them inconsistently, with varying accounts of their number and precise divine functions. This ambiguity reflects the evolving and localized nature of the Mesopotamian religion, which developed over thousands of years across multiple city-states. One text mentions as many as 50 Anunnaki associated with the city of Eridu alone, while in Inanna's descent into the netherworld, only 7 Anunnaki appear, serving as judges who condemn Inanna to death for attempt to usurp the underworld. This judicial role reveals another important aspect of Anunnaki authority, their function as cosmic arbiters who maintain divine law. Which, again, it goes back to this idea that they're kind of not necessarily ethereal, living in heaven type gods, but more kind of bossing people around, living on earth type gods.
Yeah, more like your boss walking around watching you work type god. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the importance of the Anunnaki is further reflected in their prominent appearances across multiple foundational Mesopotamian scripts. In the
You're having fun tonight, aren't you? Just wake up from a nap and you have to start pronouncing words like Babylonian.
In the Babylonian creation epic, Enuma, at least the god Marduk assigns the Anunnaki their positions after his rise to supremacy among the gods. And the Babylonian version of this epic makes a numerical distinction, mentioning 600 Anunnaki of the underworld, but only 300 Anunnaki of heaven. So different Anunnaki, a division. Further indicating the existence of a complex underworld cosmology that had developed by this period. In gratitude for Marduk's leadership, the Anunnaki, described as the great gods, built Isilgia, a splendid
Isagila,
a splendid temple dedicated to Marduk, Ea, and Elul, demonstrating their role in establishing important religious institutions. I think it's important at this point that I point out that I am Scottish and I will mispronounce words very often, very badly.
I know, I just like winding you up about it.
So the 8th century BC poem, so 8th century BC would be what? 700 BC, roundabout-ish.
Yeah.
Provides yet another perspective on the Anunnaki, describing them as brothers of the god Nergal and depicting them as antagonistic towards humanity. This portrayal reveals a darker aspect of how ancient Mesopotamians viewed their deities, potentially dangerous forces that could bring destruction as well as blessing. This ambivalence towards powerful deities was common in ancient polytheistic religions, where gods were understood to have complex, sometimes unpredictable motivations that didn't always align with human interests. Well, you can understand that. I mean, if you were a god, why would you be bothered with these ant-like creatures that, had no real bearing on your life or your existence?
Yeah, but the thing about gods for me is that when ancient primitive humans would hear thunder or see lightning or watch the sun come up every morning, not understanding what these things were, and that the sun was a star that the planet revolves around, and we have sunrises and sunsets because of the fact that the Earth is round and all this other stuff. And particularly with thunder and lightning and rain and storms and things like that, it's a fairly straightforward thing to imagine that there's some sort of rain god who gets unhappy with you and causes a flood or something like that. But the other thing that gets me is if you look at the hunter-gatherer societies, they had gods, but not to the same organized extent.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've got people like the San, the Bushmen and the Kalahari, who are completely in tune with nature. And okay, they might not know that the world is round and stuff like that, but they don't necessarily ascribe everything to gods and have warring gods and things like that. It's this idea that you have either gods that have moods, and one minute they like humans and the next minute they don't and want to smite them. And on the other hand, you've got these, I don't know, it's contradictory, because there are even stories about gods fighting as well. I mean, if you look in this, the Anunnaki didn't always get on with each other.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, let's face it, who does,
Mm-hmm.
We kind of fight with each other occasionally. I mean, I don't mean you and I, Ed. I mean, well, we do, but I don't mean you and I mean generally humans. But this actually puts me off on a slight tangent here, and I know we don't normally go on tangents on this show because we're kind of focused and have a laser-like vision for where we're meant to be. But believe that, you believe anything. But what about Aborigines? They have all this Dreamtime thing, and they're in touch with the land and the air and the heavens, and there's a kind of interdimensional aspect to, I think, a lot of their kind of thinking. Did they have gods? I can't actually recollect the Aborigines having
I don't know.
deity that
I don't know. Let's find out.
Oh, sorry, I really shouldn't have gone off on a tangent. My apologies, people. Anyway, while Ed's doing that,
on-the-fly research.
A particularly interesting text from the Neo-Assyrian period, i.e. 9 to 6 BC, though badly damaged, describes Marduk leading his army of Anunnaki into the sacred city of Nippur. And I'll probably mispronounce that also. And causing a disturbance that results in a flood. How do you cause a disturbance? Do you break a dam, maybe? I don't know. This action prompts the resident gods of Nippur, so there are other gods in Nippur, probably other Anunnaki, to take shelter in the Shemesha temple dedicated to Nanarto. The text goes on to describe a complex divine conflict that ultimately results in Marduk putting the Ishu, or whatever, gods on trial before the Anunnaki, highlighting their continued judicial function even in later Mesopotamian religious thought. So we've got gods fighting gods and then being put up in front of a trial who are presided over by the Anunnaki. So do we have minor gods that aren't considered Anunnaki?
Well, this is where we kind of get back into a bit of the Sitchin stuff.
Oh, your favourite. This is your favourite. And
it's
I mean, you love this guy, don't you? I mean, if you were a woman, you'd bear his children, wouldn't you?
No. No, it's not any kind of hero worship, but certainly his first book, The 12th Planet, resonated with me quite a lot. I mean, you do have to suspend disbelief a little bit. And the problem with Sitchin is he wrote a whole bunch more books. The second one is okay. And after number 2, he kind of starts disappearing up his own arse. And even in The 12th Planet, there's a lot of stuff that he talks about which it never appears in any like scrolls or cuneiform tablets or anything like that. Just going back to the Aborigines, yes, they do have they have a rich spiritual tradition that includes beliefs in various supernatural beings, often described as gods, spirits, or ancestral beings. Though their concepts differ from the Western notion of deities, their spirituality is deeply tied to the land, the dreaming or dream time, and ancestral stories that explain creation and the laws of existence. So without going into lots of detail about Aboriginal gods, I mean, it's the same in Africa. And although a lot of modern Africans have Christianity now, they still believe in ancestral spirits, and their original sort of religions were very much centered around ancestral spirits and water spirits, and not necessarily sort of monotheistic God that tells you what to do. It's much more relating to the land, and they have a sky god and that sort of thing. Which is why it's interesting that suddenly the Sumerians would have this incredible mythology that they created around the Anunnaki, and they have all these gods with different names. And as you said, it seems like you have different levels of Anunnaki, although there's a possibility that if the stories that the Anunnaki actually created humans are true, which is what the Sumerians themselves believed, or at least what's written down in their mythology. If we say, what if it's not mythology?
Whose translation of the Sumerian text said that the Anunnaki created humans?
Oh, Sitchin.
Yeah. See, now,
but no, it's actually, I think it's...
Hold on.
Hang on, let me just check that.
This is possibly a slight flaw in Sitchin here, because as I understand it, academics and students of Sumerian texts don't necessarily agree with Sitchin's translations. So I think that that's something that you've got to consider when it comes to Sitchin. He's maybe, you know what people are like. You like to see things that are going to reinforce the things that you believe in. So you maybe just take that extra step sometimes when really it wasn't justified, you know?
Well, that's true, but at the same time, okay, so just going back to what we were talking about, yes, mainstream interpretations of the Anunnaki based on scholarly translation of Mesopotamian cuneiform texts do describe them as playing a role in the creation of humans.
Good.
But this is understood within a mythological and symbolic framework, not a literal or scientific one.
Well, right, okay. Why would they say that? Because if you are, why would you come up with the idea that someone made you, right? If you didn't have any knowledge of how to make people. Now, I mean, I'm spitballing here, right? But you know, we're a group. We're sitting around the campfire. We're chewing on a bit of mammoth or whatever, right? And we're thinking, you know, this is a great life. We've just killed a mammoth. The tribe's healthy. We've had more children. We make children by having children, you know. So who made us at the very, very beginning? And you would think back and think, well, why would you suddenly come up with the idea that someone manipulated something to cause you to be around? Because that's effectively what the Sumerians are saying, aren't they?
Yeah, but you also have to think that those ancient primitive hunter-gatherer societies of humans that you're talking about that are sitting around a campfire chewing some mammoth, those people didn't necessarily have time to spend a massive amount of time thinking about where they came from and where it all started, because most people in that sort of position are totally focused on survival.
Yes,
because
I know.
You don't have a comfortable house with electric lights, and you can stay up all night pondering.
I'll give you that. Yes, I know. But having said that, right, and you're a big boy. You've been out and walked, right? Now, if you think these guys are out walking for 3 or 4 days to try and find something to kill and then eat, right? And they're not focused on, you know, killing anything because they're just trying to get somewhere to, you know, to maybe the hunting grounds or the breeding grounds or whatever, to try and track down a mammoth or some kind of animal. And they've got plenty of time to think, you know. They're wandering around thinking to themselves because they can't talk because they might scare off something, you know. So, or they might attract something that's going to eat them, which is even worse. So they're not going to talk to each other, but they've got their own selves. So they're just walking along completely blank, or are they having a thought about life, the universe, and everything? I know where I would be.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Yeah. And there's also, I mean, there's also certain plants and things that they might encounter along the way, or varieties of mushroom or whatever that might induce effects on the brain, which might, they might sit there thinking, oh, that's a nice looking mushroom, and end up off their tits contemplating the universe or dead.
Yeah, don't eat that. That killed Joe. Poor Joe. He died to save the tribe.
Oh dear. Did anyone remember what mushroom he was eating? No. Oh, bollocks. Right. Go through 10 different people before someone actually pays attention to the mushroom.
When someone freaking take notes on what mushrooms are good and what ones are bad.
But it's still, I mean, even if we say that this whole Anunnaki thing is actually just a myth, and it was something that the Sumerian high priests or whatever dreamed up, for supposedly this civilization to just spring up in Mesopotamia, which is current day Iraq, for those who don't know. The Mesopotamia means between two rivers, which is the Tigris and the Euphrates. And there's plenty of evidence in Iraq that wasn't actually destroyed by the Americans, although they did do a fair amount of damage to ancient ziggurats and all kinds of things.
Actually, let's just examine that briefly, because it seems to me suspicious. Not only did the Americans do a fair bit of damage when they were in there, but the next people that came along, and or people like ISIS and all that, they did an incredible amount of damage as well. Why are people so intent on destroying our history?
Well, there's actually a very interesting story relating to the Tomb of Gilgamesh. Now, the Epic of Gilgamesh is the Sumerian version of Noah's Ark. It's their flood myth story. And there's actually a large number of similarities between the Epic of Gilgamesh and the story from Noah's Ark. Not just about the flood, but in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Noah is called Utnapishtim. And he's warned by the gods, Enki, in this one, in the Sumerian myth. And so Enki warns Utnapishtim and says there's a big flood coming, and gives him the instructions on how to build a vessel to save a load of lives. And they construct these essentially ark-like things. And they're both told to bring their families and representatives of the animal species and things like that. You have the whole massive global flood. And then afterwards, they both release birds. Utnapishtim released a dove, a swallow, and a raven. Noah released a raven and a dove to see if the waters had receded. And in both stories, the ark eventually comes to rest on a mountain. They both survivors offer a sacrifice to the divine after the flood. And both narratives conclude with the restoration of life on Earth. So it's very cataclysmy. But the reason I brought Gilgamesh up is that there is a story that I've heard from at least two different sources, but it's still not necessarily confirmed, that the invasion of Iraq, that they supposedly found the tomb of Gilgamesh, and that there were high-ranking American politicians who were extremely interested in that. I think maybe Hillary Clinton. I think, if memory serves me correctly, her name was in there. And so, is there some sort of tomb of Gilgamesh? And does it potentially contain information about, I don't know, a catastrophe cycle or something that happens?
This is beginning to sound like the plot of The Mummy, the one with Tom Cruise.
Well, yeah, but there's no mummies. It's just it is a bit Indiana Jonesy.
Yeah.
I hesitate comparing Indiana Jones and Hillary Clinton, but there you have it. I mean, yes, but the whole point about the show is speculation.
But both people were completely superfluous to what actually happened. Right. So we're back to. Shall we go back to Sitchin? Shall we?
Yeah.
Sitchin attributed the creation of ancient Sumerian culture to the Anunnaki. This is in his book, The 12th Planet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Whom he reinterpreted not as gods, but as an advanced race of. See, why does he jump to extraterrestrials? Right. From a planet beyond Neptune called Nibiru. According to Sitchin's theory, this planet follows an elongated elliptical orbit that takes 3,600 years to complete one revolution around the Sun. This astronomical claim forms the foundation of his broader narrative about extraterrestrial intervention in human history and development. Right. Problem number one. That planet's going to be frozen.
Well, according to the book, and according to Sitchin's interpretation of the Sumerian archaeological finds, texts, and, well, not texts, but cuneiform tablets and cylinder seals, that Nibiru had some sort of internal heating mechanism, that it was actually generated enough heat to actually make the surface habitable. And I don't know. I mean, I agree with you.
I've just had a thought. I've just had a thought, Ed, and it's one of my wilder theories, okay? Maybe the hollow earth isn't the hollow earth. Maybe the hollow earth is Nibiru, and they're living inside it. And that's why they're warm.
Well, according to the book, the reason that the Anunnaki came to Earth in the first place is because of gold, because they needed gold that they'd had some sort of ecological breakdown on Nibiru, and they needed gold to solve that. And so they came to Earth because they detected gold here. And originally they brought a worker race with them, or they brought workers with them to mine the gold. And interestingly, there have been very ancient gold mines found in places like Zimbabwe that people have struggled to explain. But eventually these workers rebelled. And so either Enki or Enlil, or one of them, had a good idea of creating a kind of slave race with the creatures that they'd found on Earth, probably great apes or something.
Yeah.
And so they mixed their own DNA with the DNA of these ape-like creatures, I suppose, or Neanderthal-like creatures. No, maybe not Neanderthals, but I don't know, Cro-Magnon man, or one of these proto-humans before the missing link. Because one might suggest that there's no link. That the missing link is there because there is no link.
Yeah, and that's sound. I can accept that if this is what happened. But can I go back a little bit? What kind of ecological disaster affects your planet that only gold can fix?
I don't know.
See, and this is maybe a little bit of a flaw in Stitch. And you've read this book, yeah?
Yeah.
And he never explains this elusive ecological disaster that gold is needed to fix. Is that right?
Well, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, he certainly doesn't go into any kind of geological detail about what might cause. I mean, and also all of the other issues with having a planet, because supposedly it has a 3,600 year orbit. Yeah. But it's a highly elliptical orbit, meaning that it stretches really far out. It's like with Earth, it's not quite a circle, but
yeah, I know. I mean, that's the way. It's a way outside everybody else's orbit just now. Then and would be out there for a long, long time. Yeah, yeah.
But it's also the thing. One of the sort of slight tenuous links is that if this planet has a 3,600 year orbit, we've had roughly 6,000 years of civilization since the Sumerians.
Yep.
We would have expected to see Nibiru within that 6,000 years do at least one, possibly two orbits.
Maybe we have.
And so you would think that there might, I don't know, it might be that Earth has to be in a particular position or something.
But think about it. In the Dark Ages, people weren't looking at the sky and recording things because it was kind of frowned upon, wasn't it? I mean, poor old Copernicus, he got a pretty hard time for it.
But humans, I mean, modern humans, because of light pollution and indoor lighting and stuff, we don't appreciate the night sky in the same way that our ancestors did.
Oh, you should try living in rural France. The sky is amazing.
Yeah, that was what it was like in Africa when I was a kid.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the stars seemed so close that you could almost reach out and grab one,
like a velvet blanket above your head.
Yeah, and so tracking the stars is something that is as ancient as humans. And it's the same with the sun, tracking the position of the sun. I mean, you have various megalithic temples in Malta, loads of them, and each one of them is designed to track the sun, but they had to keep moving it because of precession.
Oh, I'm sorry. Soldiers just going just Dropped a bombshell. Bob Lazar, how bizarre. Yeah, okay. We'll maybe come to that another time, soldier.
Don't get him started on Bob Lazar. I actually like Bob. I like Bob Lazar. Not partially because of the whole Area 51 thing, but the main reason I think Bob Lazar is cool is because he put a freaking jet engine on a motorcycle.
It wasn't really a jet engine. It was a pulse. It was a pulse engine.
You're such a pedant.
Oh, sorry.
You're an insufferable pedant sometimes.
Listen, there's a bit of pot and kettle there, mate. There really
Oh, no,
is.
I know. I'm terrible. Absolutely. Right, let's get back to... So we are actually in the Sitchin side of things.
Oh, yeah, we are.
And yes, I mean, he died in 2010.
Yeah.
And proposed serious radical reinterpretations of Sumerian texts. And he was actually born in Soviet Azerbaijan, interestingly. He was born in Baku. Yeah, didn't know that, actually. But he was raised in Palestine, mandatory Palestine, later Israel. Moved to New York in 1952, where he developed his controversial theories. Despite having no formal academic credentials in Assyriology, Sumerology, or ancient languages, Sitchin claimed to have taught himself ancient Sumerian cuneiform, allowing him to offer what he presented as alternative translations of ancient texts. Now,
have you seen ancient Sumerian?
Well,
cuneiform?
I was going to suggest.
It's like a chicken walking on freshly laid concrete.
Yeah, it's hash. I mean, you could literally come up with anything.
Yeah.
I mean, because even the agreed upon translations of cuneiform tablets, and I mean, there is a Sumerian dictionary. Yeah. I think the University of Pennsylvania, if memory serves me, which it doesn't always. But I mean, for people who haven't seen Sumerian cuneiform, just go to Google Images and type in Sumerian cuneiform tablets, and you'll see what John talks about as a chicken walking across fresh cement. Yeah. And it's obviously not, because it is a language, but in terms of interpretation, I don't know how anyone managed to read it in the first place, frankly, because
was there not that tablet? Was there not a Rosetta? Was it the Rosetta Stone? Did it not have some cuneiform on it as well? Or was that something else I'm thinking about? Was that three languages?
Yeah, no. One of them was Egyptian hieroglyphics, and one of them was Greek. I'm not sure what the third one was off the top of my head, but I don't think it was cuneiform.
Just look up the Rosetta Stone and find
out. And I mean, there's also the Sumerian cylinder seals, which Sitchin references a lot in his book. And the cylinder seals are essentially what it sounds like. It's a cylinder that has images carved on it. And then to read it, you roll it out into wet clay. And when you do that, you get an image. And one of the famous ones that he points to shows an accurate representation of the solar system, which implies that the Sumerians knew the Earth wasn't flat or any of that stuff that early Christians believed. But then I don't think early Christians did anyway. It was a Catholicism thing. But yeah, that aside, I mean, you could literally claim to be able to read cuneiform and say, "Oh no, I've got my own interpretation of these tablets," and just make up a bunch of shit after that. Because I mean, when Sitchin first wrote The 12th Planet, it was years and years ago, decades ago now. And I don't know if there are more people now who can read cuneiform, but he is completely poo-pooed by mainstream scientists, which is one of the reasons I find him appealing, because I find mainstream science, well, you know my opinion on mainstream science.
Complex and nuanced.
Um, yeah, that's being polite. And it's I do struggle with the whole Nibiru 3,600 year elliptical orbit.
Yeah.
But supposedly, when that orbit coincides with Earth, you get floods and stuff. So Sitchin reckons that the flood in the Epic of Gilgamesh was caused by Nibiru getting too close or something. And the Anunnaki knew about it, warned Utnapishtim, and then essentially got on their spaceships and waited it out in orbit.
Laughing
and
at
then
us floundering about in the water. Oh, help.
and then they realized that the humans were really suffering, so they came back to Earth and set up civilization again.
For it to happen again in 3,600 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. What about his claim that human kingship was inaugurated to provide intermediaries between mankind and the Anunnaki, creating the concept of a divine right of kings?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what he says in a nutshell. And it kind of, if you're a super powerful alien race and you've come to this new planet to mine for gold, and your own workers just up tools and decide to not do it, so you create a slave race, you'd have to have some way of controlling them. And so the best way to do that would be to appoint leaders. And perhaps, I don't know, maybe they were slightly genetically different or something. Maybe they had a little bit more Anunnaki in them than the others. Don't know. Well, I don't know, being slightly facetious, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
But you would potentially create these kings and queens, and you'd have something akin to a royal bloodline, which all of these people believe. All of these rich aristocratic people, they're all obsessed with bloodlines.
They are, aren't they?
And yeah, so.
But none of them really look like. Well, this is the thing. You sit there and you look at the our current monarch, and you think, well, he doesn't look like an Anunnaki, does he? But what does an Anunnaki actually look like? I mean, are we going back to someone that looks like Tutankhamun or something, or are we back to the big head thing, or are they just completely off the wall?
Well, the closest we can get to really of having any idea what the Anunnaki look like is the Sumerian cylinder seals, but they're not exactly detailed.
No.
And the handbags make an appearance.
What's in the goddamn handbag? Everybody's got one and nobody knows what's in it.
I think if you could answer that question, you would probably crack the riddle of everything.
Is it the keys to the spaceship?
Maybe it's a laptop bag.
It's just every one of them's got a freaking handbag.
Maybe, yeah. And I mean, there's all sorts of official interpretations of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that this particular image appears all the way around the world, not in every single depiction of ancient gods, but enough of them to make you think, what the hell's going on with the handbag? And why would so if the intent is,
Dave Barnes says it's a little dog.
Yeah, maybe a little chihuahua in the handbag. Who knows?
Paris Hilton and our doggy.
Sure. The thing is that if it's supposed to represent godly power or knowledge or wisdom or whatever, you could think that one ancient civilization would come up with that imagery, but for them all to have the same thing, And okay, the gods all look completely different, and all the mythologies are completely different, but they all have bloody handbags.
Yeah, that handbag freaks me out. Something weird going on there.
It is, like I said, I think if you could unlock the secret of the handbag, it would make sense of so much other things.
Maybe it's like, the president. Maybe it's the nuclear football,
It's at this point, any guess is valid because
or maybe it's their key to another dimension. Because there is a theory that they're interdimensional beings and not necessarily of this earth,
Well, maybe Nibiru exists
interdimensional
in an alternate dimension, and has a 3,600-year-old orbit, and the Anunnaki interdimensional travelers instead of interstellar travelers,
or both.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I don't know if you got a bit Star Trek-y. Maybe Nibiru was slipping in and out of dimensions, and they couldn't control it, and they had to cover it in a layer of gold or something.
Slipping in and out of consciousness.
Oh dear!
Right. So after Sitchin's death in 2010, his Anunnaki theories were further developed and expanded by various authors and content creators who should know better. I'm looking at you, Ed. Yeah, I'm looking at you. Who are often treated his writings as authoritative sources, despite their rejection by mainstream scholarship. One significant contributor to this expanded mythology was David Icke, a former sports commentator who, beginning in the early 90s, incorporated Sitchin's ideas into broader conspiracy theories about reptilian beings secretly controlling human civilization. Icke's work connected the Anunnaki narrative to other conspiracy theories, further distancing these interpretations from their historical origins in ancient Mesopotamian religion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's... And the thing is that Sitchin opens himself up to a bunch of that because he wrote more books than just the first one.
Yeah.
If he'd just stopped at the first one, then...
You could say that about so many things, couldn't you?
Sure.
Like Star Wars. If you just stopped after Return of the Jedi, George. If you hadn't sold out to Disney. If Johnson stopped after the first one, would have been perfection.
Yeah, but they never do.
I know.
Hollywood never do. And they'll make sequel after sequel, and maybe one or two of the sequels will be half decent, but none of them will ever capture. It's like
Aliens. Well, Alien and Aliens were probably, in my view, one of the most successful pairings. You didn't need all the rest after that. I mean, the rest, some of them were fun, some of them were crap. But the first two were actually both on a par.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, so where are we going next? I mean, the stuff that... Because I read Sitchin's first book in, I think, about 2004, 2005, originally.
I've never read
Sitchin. I mean, the 12th Planet is a good read.
Yeah.
And it's... the thing is that he does develop... let's say he has a creative imagination, and there's certain things like... okay, so his readings of texts like the Enuma Elish and
New donation from Nick
introduced ideas such as Nibiru as a planet, or the Anunnaki as spacefaring aliens that are not supported by the original languages.
Thank you, Nick Torides, for your donation. You are much appreciated, mate.
For instance, mainstream translations describe Nibiru or Nippur as a city or a star associated with the god Marduk, not a rogue planet with a 3,600-year orbit. His assertion that Anunnaki means those who from heaven came to earth oversimplifies the term, which scholars translate as princely offspring or those of royal blood,
So we
referring
into
to a group of Mesopotamian deities.
we into the academic critique and analysis here.
Well, no, it's just to say that there are
No, I'm
valid
happy to be there.
criticisms.
Happy to be there. Yeah.
And it's not. Whilst I found, I mean, I did find that the 12th planet resonated quite a lot, because it does. When one thinks of humans as being human civilization as being older than 6,000 years, that opens up all sorts of different doors of thought that you can kind of go into and explore and things like that.
I'm with you, Ed. I'm with you, mate. I mean, there is no way that there hasn't been some kind of civilization, and I think it's been knocked down to almost like wiped out on more than one occasion. You know, I think these cataclysmic cycles that occur, I think they do occur, and I think they have knocked down civilizations, and I'm pretty sure that ours will be at some point, which is a great shame, you know, because we haven't built anything that's going to survive it. You know, we haven't built any pyramids or anything like that. You know, none of the shit that we've knocked up is going to survive a cataclysm. Maybe the seed bank in Norway. Or
well,
it's not in Norway, it's in Svalbard. I know that. Don't correct.
And I mean, there's plenty of rich people building doomsday bunkers.
Yeah, but they might not necessarily survive. But most of the stuff that we've knocked up isn't going to survive, especially if it's metal, because that disappears really quickly. You think about it. You bury a JCB, you know, in 200 years, there's going to be fuck all left. Nothing there. It's gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, that lends credence to the idea that there have been multiple ancient civilizations, but there's also there's evidence of humans having existed for not 6,000 years or 10,000 years, but hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, that screw we were talking about at the start of the show. And there is absolutely no denying that huge amounts of history have been hidden and rewritten and, kept secret mainly because it's power. Because if you know the truth of your origins, and potentially other knowledge that they just keep secret, because to admit that they know it would mean having to admit how they knew it. And I believe that absolutely. And there's all sorts of stories about the Smithsonian running around the planet, like picking up evidence of giants and all kinds of other stuff that you would just think that's completely crazy.
Yeah. I mean, have we done the Smithsonian? Did we do the Smithsonian?
No, it's on the list.
Yeah, we need to do it, because that is a shady organization. It's not a 3-letter agency, but not far off it. Yeah, as Soldier said, the bunkers will be buried under a mile of sediment. Yeah, you're never going to get there.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. It is kind of satisfying to know that people like Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos have spent all of these billions on these super luxury bunkers that then get buried between under 2 miles of sediment. And the only one that thought that one through is Elon Musk with his boring company. So he's busy.
Why do you think Why do you think Musk is so desperate to get to Mars?
Yeah, but if the solar cataclysm theory is correct, then it's going to hit Mars too.
Yeah, but he's going to be hunkered down on Mars, and he's going to be underground on Mars. And Mars doesn't have huge oceans that's going to wipe the surface clean. That's our problem here. We have this beautiful blue planet with all this, with miles deep of 5 miles deep of water, right, sloshing around. Just think what happens when something like Earth displacement and the crust moves quickly. Well, that water that's going to cover everything. You know what I mean? And then
apart
you're
from
going
the
to
tops of
get,
mountains.
it's just going to scour the world clean, you know. Whereas that can't happen on Mars because you don't have. The worst you're going to get is a severe shaking, but you're not going to
That's
have.
true.
You're not going to have, and because the planet's solidified, right? It's not even going to have an Earth displacement on Mars. It's just a solid chunk of nothing.
Yeah, but I can't see humans getting to Mars and building a civilization there that was resilient enough to even withstand
they
the
get to
effects of
Mars,
the solar micronova, for example.
if they get to Mars, they would have to build a civilization that would, because if you get to Mars, you're going to be bombarded by solar and
they'd have to,
cosmic
but
radiation all the time.
I-
Robin's with me. It's Titan or bust. I tell you, Titan is the sensible choice.
So why isn't Elon Musk talking about Titan
I
instead
have
of Mars?
no idea, but Titan's got fucking everything going for it. It's protected by Saturn's electromagnetic field, so there's nowhere near as much radiation. It's got a thick nitrogen atmosphere, so that cuts down a lot of the radiation as well. And it's easy access to water and fuel because it's got, rivers of, what do you call it? Methane, right? So Titan's a no-brainer.
Right. But Musk is obsessed with Mars.
Yeah, but Musk is a... I have to choose my words carefully here. Musk has, shall we say, a singular focus, right? Once he's got something in his head, it's a bit like a worm. That's it. It's that or nothing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at Tesla and all that. And look at Starship. You know, they're throwing money after that, good money after good money after good money, and the thing just keeps fucking falling apart or blowing up, right? And I understand what he's doing, rapid iteration and try and fix it on the fly. But then you look at Bezos, who's not that daft, and his ship has flown once and didn't fail because he spent a shitload of time engineering it. I've got to give Bezos, even though he took Captain Kirk to space on a dick-shaped rocket, which I find very difficult to forgive. You've got to give him some credit for this.
Yeah, but I mean, SpaceX is pretty successful. They have the Dragon capsule that's can take people to the ISS, and the Starship that they're building at the moment.
It's going to be a freaking big microwave.
Yeah, well, he's managed to land it and capture it on a big thing. That was pretty cool.
He caught the booster. That's not the part that goes to Mars, though, is it?
No, I think that's the bit that's on the top of the booster.
Exactly. The bit that's on top of the booster goes to Mars. Right. So Fluffy Columbus says, but Titan is far away, isn't it freezing there? You think it's warm on Mars? I'm sorry to spoil your illusions. Mars is fucking ice. It would freeze the balls off a brass monkey, if you pardon the expression.
I knew recently where that expression comes from.
Pawnbrokers.
No.
What?
No, it's from cannonballs.
Oh, right. The cannonball thing, yeah, because the thing that holds the cannonball is called the monkey. And the brass would contract and the balls would come off the holders. Yeah. But there you go.
Yep. So where are we at with the Anunnaki? I mean,
I think we're down about the academic critique. A central criticism focuses on Sitchin's linguistic claims. Despite his assertion of self-taught proficiency in ancient languages, professional linguists and Sumerologists have identified numerous errors in his translations and interpretations of Sumerian texts. Without formal training in the complex writing systems and languages of ancient Mesopotamia, Sitchin appears to have misunderstood fundamental aspects of cuneiform writing and Sumerian grammar, leading to translations that diverge significantly from scholarly consensus. These mistranslations form the foundation of his theoretical framework, undermining the entire premise of his Anunnaki narrative?
Now,
You tell me.
well, the thing is, I can't read cuneiform,
Yeah.
but I also don't trust groups of scientists. Anytime you tell me about mainstream scientific consensus,
yeah,
I start my the hairs go up on the back of my neck because
having said that, right, Ed, his claim of being self-taught and reading ancient cuneiform texts is a struggle when you realize how complex these things are, especially if
really
you're not a lifelong linguist. You know?
Yeah, I agree, and I think skepticism aside, but particularly when you look at cuneiform itself, you only have to take one look at one cuneiform tablet to realize that this is not something that you can't just pick it up. There has to be some sort of reference point to be able to interpret all of those like dots and dashes. If you look at Morse code, for example, the dots and the dashes, if you had no idea that Morse code was actually a language, you wouldn't be able to work out what was an A, what was a B, what was a C, etc. And with cuneiform, that's even more difficult. So it's the kind of thing that lots of people would have to spend a lot of time looking at, and I don't know. I'm not entirely sure how scholars even go about translate. Hang on, let me find that out. I need to answer that question.
Well, here's a point though that kind of rebuts me, and actually, I think in some respects favors Sitchin, because it says, for example, in his discussion of Egyptian funerary texts, Sitchin quoted what he called the Stairway to Heaven from the Egyptian pyramid text while significantly abbreviating the original passage without disclosure. The complete text, properly translated, contradicts several key points in his interpretation, including his claim that pharaohs believed they would travel to a single imperishable star rather than joining the many imperishable stars mentioned in the original text. To me, that's not that big a difference, is it? Really? I might be wrong. I might be wrong.
Okay, so there is something that's cited as the Rosetta Stone for cuneiform, but it's not exactly, because the Rosetta Stone, it was demotic, which I've never even heard of.
Yeah,
Greek demotic and hieroglyphs that were the Rosetta Stone.
Yeah.
But there is a Behistun inscription as a key carved into a cliff in western Iran around 520 BCE by Darius I of Persia.
Darius.
The Behistun.
He's dead. Did you know that?
Darius. Well,
do you remember Darius?
520 BCE. Yeah,
no,
he's very, very dead.
I'm talking about Darius Dinesh. Remember the Scottish guy, the singer? He died quite young.
Never heard of him.
You've never heard of Darius? He was famous up here. He came from Paisley, I think.
I don't even really know famous people down here, frankly. Anyway, so it features the same three texts, Old Persian, in the same text in three scripts: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian cuneiform. Old Persian, with its simpler semi-alphabetic script of 36 characters, was the entry point. Scholars like Henry Creswick Rawlinson, who climbed the cliff in the 1830s and 1840s to copy it, used known Persian names, example Darius and Xerxes, from Greek histories to crack the Old Persian script, then worked backward to decode the related Babylonian and Elamite versions. The Old Persian cuneiform was deciphered first because it was a relatively new script created under Darius and less complex than the syllabic and logographic systems of earlier cuneiform. Rawlinson and others like Georg Friedrich Grotefend earlier in 1802 identified royal names and titles by comparing them to,
Pardon?
Achaemenid, Achaemenid? I don't know. Yeah, that one got me. Achaemenid genealogies recorded by Greek historians like Herodotus. This provided a phonetic foundation, unlocking a basic vocabulary and grammar. So, with Old Persian as a foothold, scholars tackled the Babylonian text on Behustan, which used Akkadian cuneiform, a script adapted from Sumerian, with hundreds of signs representing syllables, words, or concepts. The trilingual nature of the inscription allowed cross-referencing, so that a phrase could be matched to its Babylonian equivalent, revealing signs and meanings. By 1857, a famous test by the Royal Asiatic Society, where 4 scholars independently translated an Akkadian text with consistent results, confirmed the decipherment's reliability. So, yes, there is a text, and it's, I guess, I'm not sure how similar the Babylonian cuneiform is to the Sumerian cuneiform, but it certainly looks the same. And I guess once you can get your head around what it looks like, and you can start to see words instead of just chicken feet, that lends itself. It's not just people kind of stabbing in the dark trying to figure this stuff out. There is actually some point of reference, which means that you can't really go completely off-piste and kind of claim to have deciphered this whole. I don't know. There's no reports of Sitchin climbing up this mountain, so it's difficult to for someone to come along and say, "Oh, I've learned how to do this independently, and my translations are different from yours."
Yeah,
it is a bit suspicious.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So, and there's other things, but we'll get to that in a second, because Darius Campbell Dinesh was a pop idol singer on, that show called Pop Idol. He was Scottish, and he died in Minnesota in 2022, born 1980, so he was 41. He died from apparently inhaling chloroethane, whatever that is. But yeah, he was quite well known. Right, so scientific impossibilities. From an astronomical perspective, Stitchin's claims about Nibiru have been thoroughly debunked according to NASA. NASA senior scientist David Morrison has explicitly stated that Nibiru does not exist. That's it. There is no evidence for a 10th planet with the orbital characteristics Stitchin described. The alleged 3,600-year elliptical orbit that would bring a planet from beyond Neptune into the inner solar system would be highly unstable over astronomical timeframes and would have a catastrophic gravitational effects on other planets' orbits. Well, yeah, it might well have, and maybe it did. Maybe it did. Maybe that did happen, because as I'm not, I mean, look at Venus. Venus is a retrograde orbit. Venus rotates the wrong way from everybody else, and it's not even in the same plane as us. It's slightly inclined.
And we have asteroid belts in places that don't make sense.
Yeah, like the asteroid belt. Yeah. And
which looks actually distinctly like
and
potentially the remains of a planet or something.
The other thing is we have our gas giants further out and our rocky planets further in, when most solar systems are the other way around. Did you know that?
But that's also one of the reasons why life is able to exist at all on Earth, because we get protected from
by Jupiter
and Saturn. Jupiter more than Saturn, obviously, but
hold on. Fluffy says Venus doesn't have a retrograde, but I'm pretty sure Venus does have a retrograde rotation. Venus. I'm sorry, somebody has challenged me. I must reply.
No, that's fine. I'll just keep ploughing on, because there's also genetic claims. The genetic engineering claims central to Stitchin's narrative of human creation also contradict established scientific understanding. The idea that an extraterrestrial species could combine their DNA with that of early hominids to create modern humans overlooks the fundamental compatibility issues between alien and terrestrial biochemistry. Our current understanding of evolution, supported by fossil evidence and genomic studies, provides a coherent account of human development that requires no extraterrestrial intervention to explain the emergence of Homo sapiens from earlier hominid species, except for the fact that there's no actual link, and except for the fact that DNA and the study of genomics that's come from the discovery of DNA might not necessarily be what we think it is. There's plenty of people who question whether DNA even exists. See Jamie Andrews on Twitter, who's done some great work on both that and also virology, which he's completely debunked, and he claims he's going to debunk genetics as well. So that aside,
genetics?
Jamie Andrews.
Jamie Andrews.
He's on Twitter. He's quite famous. Well, no, he's quite a well-known
debunker.
Subversive, counter-revolutionary scientist type person. But he's only, he's worth a follow. Jamie_AA or something, I think he's called.
Fluffy's obsessed with Uranus. I don't know why, but we weren't talking about Uranus. We're talking about Venus. Venus spins the wrong way.
Can we just call it Uranus?
It spins the opposite direction from every other planet.
Is that now verified?
It's verified.
Is that being fact-checked?
It has been fact-checked. I've fact-checked it and it's right. I fucking knew I was right and I'm right. I'm very rarely wrong, to be fair.
Well, yeah, it's debatable.
No, hold on. You just put something out there in a kind of disparaging manner, right? Now,
I was being facetious.
I know you were. Now, I'll clarify the point. I'm very rarely wrong when it comes to facts, not necessarily opinion. Okay, does that help you?
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Right, okay.
Although facts in 2025 are fairly malleable things anyway.
Yeah, right. Anyway. Right, so that's put to bed. Venus does spin the wrong way. It does have a retrograde rotation. Where are we?
Well, we've sort of covered the
cultural impact,
the whole
down there.
Anunnaki creating humans thing.
Yeah.
Now I'm still not. I don't know. I don't know about the whole Nibiru thing, but there are enough questions about the nature of humans and how we.
It's this fucking chromosome, mate. That's the one that does my nutting.
Yeah,
chromosome.
That's where I was going.
Yeah,
that there are certain things about humans that don't make sense. They haven't been able to find a missing link, despite being able to link pretty much everything else. Humans stand out. There's also aspects of our physical development that we're physically quite weak compared to most other mammals. And we have these big brains that allow us to manipulate tools, which is where we get our advantage, is technology, whether that's a bow and arrow or a quantum computer. And there's just aspects of it, particularly the chromosome, that just don't track. So the whole humans being created by some other, don't know whether it's Anunnaki or something else or someone else. I don't know, but suffice it to say, there are things that don't make sense, and we could spend an entire episode just talking about those. So let's move on.
Yeah, okay. It does lead us into this, which is, despite scholarly rejection, Anunnaki theories continue to thrive in popular culture, particularly online. YouTube search algorithms often prioritize sensationalist content about ancient aliens when users search for information about Sumerian religions, creating what some researchers have described as a poisoned search environment that makes finding legitimate educational material difficult. Are we adding to that?
I don't know. Maybe
I hope so.
Well, if you've come here expecting legitimate educational material, we're doing our best to try and make a fair fist of describing the Anunnaki from two complete layman's people who
but I mean,
like wine.
who's better to tell you about stuff than people that don't know anything about it?
Well, I was going to say that maybe one of the reasons that the sensationalist content is being put forward on YouTube is because the legitimate educational people are boring as hell and don't make decent I mean, okay, there is a certain knack to producing content, but I mean, if some of the lecturers that I've had in my life at university or anything to go by, they should just make bedtime audio and just read into that, and you just fall asleep listening to whatever.
I mean, finding a good teacher is like finding a nugget of gold in a pile of coal. It's so rare that it's almost never going to happen. But when you find that good teacher can inspire a whole more than a generation's worth of kids.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I had a few teachers that were a bit like that.
Yeah.
I mean, judging by my grandfather was actually a teacher, and at his funeral, it was the church was completely full, and the number of family there were not tiny, but it wasn't, because my family's scattered all over the world. But the thing that I did notice was it was absolutely filled with former students. And I thought that was amazing. And they would all, it's funny because my grandfather wasn't the sort of teacher that would ever give you an answer. And he had a bit of a temper, so he'd get a bit frustrated that you weren't, he'd give you everything you needed to know to figure out the problem on your own, but he wouldn't tell you the answer, which is, in my opinion, is making a good teacher.
Yeah.
But one thing that all of his former students that I talked to at his funeral said that they absolutely hated him when they were at school, but they were forever grateful in their adult life for what he taught them. And to be honest, I credit him with the same thing as well, because he taught. He was from that old school of teachers that we don't have anymore. Well, don't have as much anymore, who teach kids how to think, not what to think. And to look at problem solving and how you actually sit down and figure something out.
Right, new name in the troll room. New name, Claudio Barra. Fucking fantastic name. Are you Italian? I hope you're Italian. That's brilliant. That's a brilliant name. Says Velikovsky and his Velikovsky and his book Worlds in Collision explains from his view why Venus turned. Yeah, is this to do with Venus coming out of Saturn? Was it Venus that came out of Saturn, or was it us that came out of Saturn? I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, that's catastrophe theory stuff. Ben mentions Velikovsky a lot.
The Velikovsky stuff is fantastic. It's definitely well worth reading. If you're into that kind of stuff, have a read of Velikovsky. It really is fantastic. Anyway, but yeah, good to see you, Claudio. A fucking brilliant name. I love that. I mean, you just feel like empowered when you're saying something like Claudio. Yeah. Tremendous.
Yeah, it does have a Roman gladiator sort of ring to it.
Yeah, it does.
Oh no, that would be Claudius, I guess.
Well, who cares? But yeah, I mean, it actually might be. I don't know. It might even be German. Maybe German. But that's okay. Hey, we're equal opportunity haters here. We'll hate everybody. No, we love you all.
Well, no, you hate everybody.
Oh, come on. Do I really? I know I say I do. I know I ambivalent
about everybody else.
I know I say I do, but really, I'm quite a gregarious sort of chap, really.
You've had a few drinks, yeah.
Yeah, right. Anyway, the History Channel's long-running series, Ancient Aliens, has been particularly influential in popularising Sitchin's theories and related speculation about extraterrestrial intervention in human history. By presenting these ideas in a format that resembles traditional educational programming, these ideas complete with dramatic narration and expert interviews. Such shows lend an appearance of credibility to claims that have been rejected by the scholarly community. And I think there's a problem here, right? I think what needs to happen with these things is there needs to be a kind of common ground, because these shows are really fucking easy to watch and really good. I enjoy them, right? But the problem is, if you're not like me who needs to know and you go and do your own research, if you take what they say at face value, then you end up with a fucking distorted worldview. And that's what happens to 99% of the world, doesn't it, Ed? Really?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think there needs to be some kind of cross-pollination between, and I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying fact-checking. I think there needs to be some kind of cross-pollination between the ability to entertain people and inform them at the same time. And I like to think that that's what we're doing. Badly, but we're trying.
Well, we certainly give it a good go.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we're both lay people. But ultimately, knowledge should be there for everybody. And it should somehow be. It was something that I always thought about academia, is that they deliberately make it inaccessible because it adds to their own sense of self-importance, because they know something that nobody else knows, and you're a bloody idiot because you don't know it, sort of thing.
They look down on you.
And then they make it very difficult for people to enter that world, and they're very elitist about their theories, which we see all over the place in modern science, where they've got their narrative. And woe betide anyone who tries to go against that. I mean, it's proper. You get the impression, certainly with some climate scientists, that they would actually really love to burn some of their opponents at the stake. I mean, people like Michael Mann. If there was a law passed that said that scientists could burn their detractors at the stake, Michael Mann would probably have 50 bonfires up within a week.
Turn it down a bit, mate. Turn it down a bit. Right, remember where we are. But apart from that,
it's the show, for crying out loud.
But the Fluffy has come up with, I want a scientific. No, I don't want a scientific consensus, Fluffy. What I want is a level playing field. But what I was trying to get across was, I think it's really important to present these things in a popular way, right? To grab people's attention and to get them intrigued. But you've still also got to give them the opportunity to be informed, right? And part of that being informed means you get to question scientists, not consensus. You get to question them, because these guys, it's like Ed says, these guys sit there and pontificate, and that's not fucking science. Science is always questioning if you're right or not. You know, these guys aren't scientists. These guys are pontificators. They've come up with a theory and they're going to stick to it regardless, because their lifeblood depends on it, because their funding depends on it. That's the problem. And that's where science is going wrong in this world.
Well, that's essentially it in a nutshell, is that the issue is with how the scientists are funded. And if there was some sort of, I mean, ultimately, the problems of this world ultimately really all boil down to how money is created and who controls that creation. But that aside, because that's a whole nother show on its own, the fact that science has commercial interests, and it's the commercial interests that effectively paying for the science, which means those scientists are not going to find anything or study anything that is going to do any kind of damage to the commercial interests that fund them. And at the same time, they're going to go out of their way to try and concoct reasons why scientific theories which support the people who pay their bills, why those are valid, even though they might not be valid.
Yeah.
And so what we really need in the world is properly independent science. We need some sort of, I don't know, global scientific.
Back to the fucking tinkerer in the shed, don't we? The independently wealthy guy who can afford to do but the problem is all science now is in these big really super expensive experiments, don't they?
And also the really rich ones tend to be the people who are good at manipulating money rather than people who are like inventors and stuff. But at the same time, it's also this concept that we had in the Middle Ages and stuff with artists like Da Vinci and Michelangelo and stuff. They'd have patrons where they'd have some rich guy who would pay all their bills and they would paint on commission or whatever.
Oh, it's not okay.
But I think I don't know. I just think that we need some sort of independent fund that isn't tied to any corporation or any government or any social movement or anything like that. It has to be purely independent, and the science
and the problem
is there for the science's sake.
The problem with universities is they're all corrupted. They're all corrupted by business and government and corporations and weapons manufacturers and whatever. And Fluffy, you're right. They won't. Anything that is funded is done for fuel. Exactly, it is. Fluffy's right. Claudio is of Italian and Dutch descent and living near the window. There you go.
That's interesting because I'm of British and Dutch descent.
Yes, we know that.
Well, I was just expressing some solidarity with a fellow half Dutch person.
Solidarity with fellow half Dutcher. Isn't being Dutch all about being half going halfers? How did that expression come about, Ed? Going Dutch.
Oh, that's from the Anglo-Dutch Wars.
Explain.
Well, because when was it? Hang on.
It doesn't matter when it was. Just a quick explanation.
Well, the British and the Dutch have fought various wars. In our collective history. And going Dutch courage particularly because of the Dutch fondness for Jenever, which is the Dutch version of gin, which is
right, okay.
It tastes of juniper, but that's about the only similarity with what English people would call gin. And so it was just the slurs. It's the same as the famous English two-fingered salute.
Yeah,
that was actually the English archers used to wave two fingers at the French, because one of the things that when the English and the French were at war is because our archers were so good, as soon as the French captured one, they would chop the two fingers off. And so that's where the two-fingered salute comes from.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
absolutely.
Every day is a school day, people. especially on Sergeant Guppy's channel.
Well, we do try. I
do try. I'm very trying. Right, the internet has fundamentally transformed how fringe theories spread and develop. No shit. Before the digital age, unconventional historical interpretations typically circulated through specialized publications with limited distribution. That's true, because you had to search out. I remember in my youth, which was some considerable time ago, you had to search out stuff. You had to go and buy magazines and things. Imagine having to go and stand in a newsagents and read magazines because you couldn't afford to buy them.
Yeah, but it was much more. The thing is, in the days before the internet, because I remember them as well, it was much more difficult to find out about these things. Yes, you might come across stuff, but you certainly didn't have the same sort of information overload. But even if you found out about niche publications in the United States, you might not even be able to get hold of a copy.
Literally, I used to go to the library and take out 12 books every week because I used my ticket and both my brother's tickets, because they didn't read, right? So I used to go to the library and take 12 books out every week on a Thursday, because my dad would always take me to the library on a Thursday. And I would take at least 4 reference and 6, usually science fiction or horror, but or even, I remember I went through a phase of reading all the Sven Hassel books. Have you ever read them?
No.
That gives you a true appreciation for what war may well have been like. They're good. They're really good. And you wouldn't want to rush into war after you've read those books. Yeah, so I have spent. I must admit, I reckon I've spent years in libraries. I still like going into libraries occasionally. You know, even though you don't
Mhm.
need to go into a library, I find it comforting. You go into a library and you just browse the books and look at the sides. And do I sound like an oddball? Because I've done that. I've actually gone into the library here and I don't have a ticket.
No, you
But
just sound a bit old.
yeah, maybe I am. But
But then
it's
you're not that much older than me, so I'm an old fart as well. I'm just didn't.
yeah,
The problem with me when I was a kid, growing up in Holland, is that I didn't. It took me years to get comfortable with
mhm,
Dutch. So finding English books in Dutch libraries was possible.
yeah.
Um, but I was just never. I used to love reading, but I'd get my granny to send me books.
Yeah, I think it's got to be, this has got to be genetic, actually, in some respects. Because I'm thinking back, right? So my dad was in the Navy for God knows how long. And then when he retired, eventually, he started doing a lot of research on ships and things for the Navy and was helping out at the what do you call it, the Maritime Museum in Irvine.
hmm
And he had people emailing them from all over the world asking them about his research on different stuff. And now I'm doing kind of the same thing, except people aren't emailing me from all over the world. I'm reaching out to people from all over the world trying to tell them stuff. And then I look at my daughter, and she loves browsing bookshops. She goes into bookshops and just browses them, you know.
hmm
And she loves she buys books and buys CDs. She still buys CDs because she wants a physical product, and that's got to be a genetic thing. That's not anything I've taught her, you know.
That's just indoctrination, isn't it?
I don't even think it's indoctrination. I've never taught her to buy a CD because I'd said
I
if
was
you want,
joking.
yeah, but you know, in this day and age of everything digital and get it right now, she'll save up and go and buy a CD.
Well, I would say you've raised her well, especially if she
Okay.
likes browsing bookshops.
Oh yeah, she loves she's pretty much an avid reader. Um, yeah, yeah, she seems to be doing all right, and she's certainly seen some of the world, you know, because we lived in France
hmm
for a while and stuff like that, and she even went to school in France, so that was quite cool.
Oh, that's a good sort of experience for a kid.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. Right, where were we, mate? Where were we? Well,
Well,
I think we're
I think
nearly
we.
there.
Yeah, I mean, we're essentially on the. I mean, we're pretty much at the conclusion now, and I think that I will always find the Anunnaki fascinating.
Oh,
I think the conspiracy theories are fascinating. Um, I think spending too much time building lots of theories on top of what Stitchin has done, I think might be a tad dangerous. But at the same
mhm.
time, I do think we all have a right to ask questions about stuff. And whether you're an expert or not, you have a right to have an opinion about something.
Yeah,
Although
of course you do. Of course you do.
that's becoming increasingly not allowed in this day and age. Um, and there are questions, like we said, about the nature of humans and how we got here, how old civilization is. All of these things are not, mainstream science would have you believe that they're all set in stone, and they're not,
No, they're not.
simply.
They're not. They're not sense.
Exactly. And so to completely discount this notion that the Anunnaki were just myths and legends and ancestral spirits or whatever.
Does everything not
Um,
come from something?
well, this is the thing, and whether Stitchin is correct or not, there are lots of questions about the Sumerians and about the Anunnaki and about the similarities between some of the stories about the Anunnaki and some of the creation myths in South America amongst the like the Maya and the Aztecs and the Olmecs and people like that. there are overlaps. The handbags are a good one.
Yeah.
And the point being that we should always be allowed to ask questions and to question official narratives. And ultimately, I think if the official scientists were a bit less close-minded and a little bit more open to some of these more outlandish theories, instead of just discounting them because, oh no, that person doesn't know who he's talking about because they're not academically trained or whatever. I don't know. I think we might get more progress and we'd probably live in a nicer world.
Yeah. Oh.
But that's my 10 cents worth anyway.
No, I think you're not far off, mate. I think you're not far off. So I think shall we round it off with the conclusions since we've done most of it?
Yep. Let's do it.
The Anunnaki represent a fascinating case study in how ancient religious concepts can be transformed through modern reinterpretation. In the original context, they were complex divine creatures within the sophisticated religious systems of ancient Mesopotamia, powerful deities who controlled the fate of humanity and maintained cosmic order. The roles and attributes evolved over thousands of years as Mesopotamian civilization developed, reflecting changing theological concerns and political realities across multiple empires and cultural phrases. The modern reinterpretation of the Anunnaki as extraterrestrial visitors represents a significant departure from the historical understanding, substituting alien tech for divine power and scientific experimentation for mythological creation. While these theories have been thoroughly rejected by the scholarly community, or academics, if you will, for their mythological flaws, mistranslations, and scientific impossibilities, they continue to exercise considerable influence in popular culture through books, television programs, and online content. For those interested in understanding the actual significance of the Anunnaki and ancient Mesopotamian religion, engaging with scholarly resources rather than sensationalist content offers a pathway to authentic knowledge. Does it? Does it, Ed?
Well,
does it? I mean, given what we've just spoken about, does it really offer a pathway to authentic knowledge? I question that. I question that.
I question the whole notion of authentic knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, I think that there are some things that we can know, but ultimately, even something as simple as gravity. You don't know how
that
we live with it every single day. It controls everything that we do. I mean, it's like when you put humans in space and you take away from gravity, the body stops working properly.
Yeah.
Our very nature is connected to that thing, but we don't understand it really.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of theories about it. And the problem with having a scientific consensus is that it closes itself off to new theories. And that's the same as we have decided that the Earth is the center of the universe and everything else spins around us and it's flat, and anyone who questions that is outside of the scientific consensus, and we will burn you at the fucking stake.
Yeah.
And I mean, in the modern equivalent of that is cancellation. I mean, there's a guy, Christopher Exley, I think he's called, who did huge amounts of fantastic academic research on aluminium. And he's essentially been buried because all of the conclusions that he came to are completely contradictory to modern society and our dependent, and the fact that we use aluminium for everything.
This sounds like a rabbit hole in the making.
Oh, it's definitely a rabbit hole in the making, but we'd probably get into masses of trouble on YouTube for it.
Really?
Because it goes into everything that YouTube doesn't like.
Good God. Okay.
Because there's links. He actually essentially linked Alzheimer's and aluminium. And he's found.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And yeah, so like
Send me the info. What's up?
Sure.
Right. So the person to me that did more to harm science than anyone else probably ever was Barack Obama. When he stood up there and said the science is settled, because that statement is an anathema to any kind of science whatsoever, because science is never settled, because you cannot prove anything to be true. You can only do the reverse.
Well, there's a really good way to test whether a scientist is actually a proper scientist, because a proper scientist will always say the science is never settled. Don't talk to me about settled science. Whereas the scientist in inverted commas, who's essentially little more than some sort of prostitute for big corporations, they will say, "Oh no, the science is settled. You can't argue with that."
Yeah.
And that's not science. If it's science is never settled. Science is a methodology. Science is a way of trying to understand the universe using particular agreed upon methods, such as being able to replicate experiments, doing experiments in the first place, things like that. But to say that we know everything there is to know about something, it's just typical human freaking arrogance.
Yeah. The other thing that annoys me about science is the rise of the mathematician, right? Because people seem to think that because you can mathematize, a problem in mathematics and demonstrate it and solve equations, that then becomes actuality. Bothers me, right? Because maths isn't science. It really isn't. Maths is math, and it's nothing to do with science in real terms. Science is experimentation and observation. It's not mathematics, because if you try hard enough, you can pretty much prove anything with mathematics. That's what really pisses me off about mathematics. But apart from the fact that I'm not particularly good at mathematics.
I'm terrible at it. Always have been. But
and you're a fucking programmer.
I'm a web developer.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. But much the same, is it not? There's a degree of
I never
programming.
did computer science at university or anything like that.
Did you not?
No.
Well, I didn't do computer science. I did information technology, which I have a master's in, believe it or not.
Yeah, there wasn't. I went down the humanities route. I did international relations at uni, and then started building web pages.
But yeah, I mean, I suppose I pretty much did a similar path, because my first degree was in more or less economics and political studies more than anything.
I needed one degree to realize that academia and ed were not compatible.
Oh no, I love academia. I love it. I know it sounds crazy, and I know I sound like a contradictarian here, but I love academia. I love studying, right? I love being in that environment. I love work. I mean, I worked in a university for 2-3 years. I love academia. I think it's brilliant when it's done right. When it's not done right, it's a fucking abysmal. But when it's done right, it's a fantastic environment to work in.
Well, that's what you would hope that universities were.
Yeah.
Increasingly less so.
I mean, I when I look back at what I've done in my life, I sometimes think, how the fuck did that end up destitute and poor? Because I've done so much. I've got 2 degrees. One's a master's.
It was the government, innit?
I've worked for. I did 20 odd years in the police. I changed the career. I worked in a university. I worked for the council, and then I worked for. And then I contracted for multinational corporations, and one of them being the police, and then everything fell apart, and I ended up on YouTube, fucking trying to sell my soul for a $5. How the hell?
Sucky.
How the hell does this happen? Yeah, do you remember that? What is it? Apocalypse Now. Yeah, me love you a long time. $5. $5. Me love you a long time.
Yeah. Right. On that note, I think we should call it a night.
Yeah, I think we should, mate. No, it was that's been a brilliant show. I've enjoyed it.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
I think the Anunnaki needed to be done by us.
Absolutely.
Purely from a selfish perspective, we had to do it. If you've enjoyed it, hey, like, share, subscribe. Consider dropping me some kind of small remuneration at Ko-fi.com if you will. But if you can't afford it, I know exactly how you feel. So, Ed, thank you very much. And you people out there, thank you very much. Good night.